The year is 479 BC. Athens lies in smoking ruins. The Persian army stretches across the horizon like a dark storm cloud, over 100,000 strong. And standing between them and the complete destruction of everything we call Western civilization are 80,000 Greek farmers, craftsmen, and warriors. Most had never traveled beyond their own valley. Yet on this single day, on a dusty plain called Plataea, these ordinary men would deliver the most crushing defeat in ancient military history. This is the story of how 10,000 Spartans and their Greek allies didn't just win a battle, they saved the world as we know it. If you're fascinated by ancient warfare and the pivotal moments that shaped our civilization, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we're diving deep into the most underrated victory in history. Welcome back to the channel where we uncover the battles that changed everything. I'm your host, and today we're traveling back 25 centuries to witness the final showdown between East and West, between democracy and autocracy, between the free Greek city-states and the mighty Persian Empire. The Battle of Plataea wasn't just another clash of armies. It was the culmination of a decade-long struggle that began when a small force of Athenians dared to burn the Persian city of Sardis. It was the final act in a drama that had already given us the legendary last stand at Thermopylae and the naval triumph at Salamis. But while those battles captured the imagination, Plataea delivered the knockout punch that ended Persian dreams of European conquest forever. What makes this battle extraordinary isn't just the scale of the victory, but how it happened. How did a fragmented Greek army, split into 3 separate groups with massive gaps between them, turn what looked like certain disaster into the most complete annihilation of a superior force in the ancient world? How did Greek citizen soldiers outfight the professional warriors of the world's greatest empire? Late August, 479 BC. The Boeotian plain shimmers under the brutal Mediterranean sun. This isn't just any battlefield. This is a carefully chosen arena where the fate of 2 civilizations will be decided. On the north bank of the Asopus River, the Persian camp sprawls like a fortress city. Mardonius, cousin to the great King Xerxes himself, commands this massive force. Inside those wooden walls and earthwork defenses, the diversity of the Persian Empire is on full display. Elite immortals with their distinctive golden shields stand ready alongside swift Median cavalry. Skilled Asiatic archers check their bowstrings, while Greek turncoats from Thebes polish their bronze armor. These aren't just soldiers. They're representatives of dozens of nations, all serving the will of one man who calls himself the King of Kings. Numbers are staggering. Modern historians estimate Mardonius commanded somewhere between 100,000 and 120,000 men. That's not just an army. That's a migration of warriors, craftsmen, slaves, and camp followers that could populate a major city. Across the river, on the broken ground dotted with olive groves and vineyards, the Greek alliance takes its positions. These men represent something completely different. They're not here because a distant king commanded it. They're here because their assemblies voted for war, because their homes are threatened, because their very way of life hangs in the balance. The Spartans, led by Pausanias, nephew of the legendary Leonidas who died at Thermopylae, hold the position of honor on the right wing. These aren't just soldiers. They're the product of the most intensive military training system ever devised. From age 7, they've been molded into human weapons, taught to move as one, fight as one, die as one if necessary. On the left wing, the Athenians under Aristides anchor the line. These are the men whose city was burned twice by Persian armies. They've seen their temples destroyed, their homes reduced to ash, their olive groves cut down. For them, this isn't just a battle, it's personal revenge. In between, a solid block of contingents from across the Greek world: Corinthians, Megarians, men from dozens of small city-states who've never fought together before, but share one common cause: freedom. 80,000 men in total. Almost all heavily armored hoplites, carrying the distinctive round shield, long spear, and bronze armor that would become the symbol of Greek military might. They're outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy with superior cavalry and archers. By every military calculation, they should lose. For 11 agonizing days, neither side moves. It's the ultimate staring contest, played out across a battlefield where the wrong decision means not just defeat, but the end of Greek independence forever. The Persians desperately want to draw the Greeks onto open ground where their cavalry can operate freely, where their superior numbers can be brought to bear, where their archers can pour volleys into packed Greek formations without fear of retaliation. Mardonius knows that in a straight fight on terrain of his choosing, numbers will tell. But the Greeks aren't cooperating. They cling to the slopes and broken ground like limpets on a rock, knowing that rough terrain will bog down cavalry charges and force the Persians to fight the kind of close-quarters battle where Greek armor and discipline shine. It's a masterclass in strategic patience, but patience has its costs. Food supplies dwindle. Water becomes more precious than gold. Persian cavalry raids constantly harass Greek supply trains, striking like wasps and vanishing before the heavily armored hoplites can respond. Then comes the blow that changes everything. Persian horsemen seize the Gargantuan spring, the only reliable source of fresh water for the entire Greek army. Suddenly, strategic patience becomes a luxury they can't afford. Greek morale, already brittle from watching Athens burn not once but twice, begins to crack under the relentless pressure. If you're enjoying this deep dive into ancient military strategy, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and let me know in the comments which ancient battle you'd like to see covered next. Under cover of darkness, the Greek commanders make a desperate decision. The entire army will pull back to new positions closer to Plataea, where fresh water flows, and the narrower front will negate Persian numerical superiority. It's a sensible plan, if everything goes perfectly. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Moving 80,000 heavily armed men across unfamiliar terrain in the dead of night is a logistical nightmare under the best conditions. Add confusion, contradictory orders, and the natural fear that comes with being surrounded by a superior enemy, and you have a recipe for disaster. The withdrawal begins well enough. The Spartans and their allies file out first, their bronze armor muffled, their discipline holding firm. The center contingents follow, thousands of men from dozens of different cities trying to maintain cohesion in the darkness. Finally, the Athenians begin their movement, bringing up the rear. But moonlight plays tricks. Hidden gullies become traps. Rocky outcrops turn familiar routes into mazes. Bugle calls meant to coordinate movement become sources of confusion, scrambling formations and sowing doubt throughout the ranks. When dawn breaks, it reveals not the orderly repositioning the commanders had planned, but a tactical nightmare. The Greek army is strung out across the battlefield in 3 separate, isolated groups with gaping half-mile gaps between them. It looks less like a strategic withdrawal and more like a complete rout. From his command position, Mardonius can hardly believe his good fortune. After 11 days of stalemate, the Greeks appear to be fleeing in panic. Their formations are broken, their line fragmented, their morale apparently shattered. This is the moment every general dreams of, the chance to catch a superior enemy in complete disarray. Without hesitation, Mardonius orders the attack. Persian cavalry thunder across the shallow waters of the Asopus River, their riders eager for the kill. Behind them comes the main infantry force, a human tsunami of Persian might rolling across the plain toward what appears to be a broken enemy. It's exactly what Mardonius has been waiting for, the perfect opportunity to use his superior numbers and mobility against disorganized Greeks. What he doesn't realize is that he's about to walk into the most devastating ambush in ancient military history. Because the Greeks aren't running. They're about to make their stand. The first wave of Persian infantry crashes into the Spartan line like a tsunami hitting a seawall. These aren't Hollywood warriors moving in slow motion. These are Spartans at the peak of their deadly art, trained since childhood to fight as a single, unstoppable organism. Their shields overlap in perfect formation, creating an impenetrable bronze wall that gleams in the morning sun. Behind this barrier, their long spears, called doru, thrust forward in a rhythmic, deadly dance that's been perfected over generations. This isn't individual combat. It's warfare as choreography, 8 ranks deep of bronze-armored death moving with mechanical precision. The Persian archers loose volley after volley of arrows, a black rain designed to break formation and sow panic. But Greek armor is thick, and the tightly packed shield wall deflects most shots harmlessly. Those arrows that do find their mark often lack the power to penetrate bronze plates, or simply glance off the curved surfaces of the hoplon shields. Then something happens that epitomizes the Spartan spirit. A warrior named Aramnistos takes an arrow clean through his thigh, a wound that would drop most men and create a gap in the line. But instead of falling, he wedges the butt of his spear into the ground and uses it to prop himself up, maintaining his position even as his comrades drag him to safety. That single act of defiant courage steadies the entire formation. The shield wall, momentarily threatened, becomes even more unyielding than before. Seeing his infantry attack stall against the Spartan phalanx, Mardonius makes a fateful decision. He can't let his initial assault fail, not with the reputation of the Persian Empire at stake. Surrounded by his elite immortals with their distinctive white shields decorated with golden pomegranates, he rides forward into the thick of the fighting. It's exactly the kind of bold leadership that Persian military tradition celebrates. The great king's cousin, leading from the front, rallying his troops by personal example. In the chronicles of Persian victories, this would be remembered as the moment when royal courage turned the tide of battle. Instead, it becomes the moment when everything falls apart. Ancient sources disagree about exactly who delivers the killing blow. Some say it was a Spartan named Aramnestis, a name that rolls off the tongue like thunder. Others credit a nameless hero, a simple soldier whose javelin or slingstone finds its mark. But everyone agrees on the result. Mardonius, the Persian commander, the cousin of the King of Kings, falls from his horse in the middle of the battlefield, struck down at the height of the fighting. For 5 heartbeats, an eternity in close combat, the immortals hesitate, stunned by the loss of their leader. It's all the opening the Spartans need. With a collective roar that echoes across the battlefield, they surge forward with renewed fury. The Persian center, suddenly leaderless and demoralized, crumbles under the relentless pressure. The anvil has struck, and the Persian line shatters like glass. Meanwhile, on the left flank, the Athenians are locked in their own desperate struggle. Their opponents aren't lightly armed Persian infantry. They're Theban hoplites, Greeks fighting for the Persian cause, armed with the same heavy equipment and fighting with the same disciplined formations as their Athenian enemies. It's Greek against Greek, bronze against bronze, a grinding battle of wills where technique matters more than numbers, and the Thebans actually have the advantage in manpower. These are men who've grown up in the same military tradition, trained with the same weapons, learned the same tactics. There's no easy victory here. But those gaps in the Greek line, the same half-mile chasms that had terrified the commanders at dawn, suddenly become an unexpected advantage. As news of Mardonius's death ripples across the battlefield and the Persian center collapses, these gaps allow the Athenians to execute a maneuver that would make military tacticians jealous for centuries to come. They wheel inward, pivoting their disciplined phalanx to strike the Thebans squarely in the flank. It's a perfectly timed attack that catches their enemies completely off guard. One moment the Thebans are holding their own in a frontal assault. The next, they're being hammered from the side by fresh troops whose battle cry mingles news of Persian defeat with the fury of men whose city has been burned twice. Demoralized by Mardonius's death and now outflanked by superior tactics, the Theban line breaks. They can't hold against the combined pressure of frontal attack and flank assault. The Athenians surge forward, their victory chant echoing across the battlefield as they link up with the triumphant Spartans. Together, the two greatest military forces in Greece form an unstoppable tide, rolling toward the Persian camp. The Persians had spent weeks turning their camp into a fortress. Earthworks, sharpened stakes, ditches wide enough to be beyond spear throw. It was designed to be impregnable, a safe haven where they could rest and resupply between campaigns. But today, with their field army shattered and fleeing in panic, that same fortress becomes a death trap. The defenses that were meant to keep Greeks out now keep Persians in, penning them up like sheep for slaughter. The victorious Greeks descend on the camp like an avenging storm. They pile brushwood against the wooden walls and set it ablaze. They jam the gates with abandoned wagons and anything else they can find, cutting off escape routes. The air fills with smoke and screams as the systematic destruction begins. What follows isn't battle, it's annihilation. The killing inside the camp is grim and thorough, an act of brutal vengeance for years of Persian aggression and the double burning of Athens. Herodotus, writing decades later, claims that 100,000 Persians died that day. Modern scholars, using more conservative estimates, suggest perhaps 30 to 50,000 casualties. Either way, it represents nothing short of the complete destruction of Persian military power in Greece. Very few escape the slaughter. An entire army, the cream of the Persian military machine, is wiped from existence in a single afternoon. Among the spoils of war are treasures that must have seemed like objects from another world to the victorious Greek farmers. Ornate scabbards worked with gold, intricately crafted drinking cups, exotic baggage camels that most of these men had never seen before. These aren't just trophies. They're tangible proof of the immense wealth and power of the empire they've just brought to its knees. Plataea was more than just another victory in the endless cycle of ancient warfare. It was a seismic event that sent shockwaves through the Mediterranean world and beyond, reshaping the trajectory of Western civilization in ways that are still felt today. This battle proved something revolutionary, that citizen soldiers who owned their own land, who voted in their own assemblies, and who fought side by side with their neighbors for their shared freedom, could utterly outfight professional troops answering to a distant autocratic king. The Greeks weren't fighting for conquest or glory. They were fighting for their homes, their families, their way of life. That personal stake fueled a ferocity and cohesion that the Persian army, for all its numbers and professional training, simply couldn't match. It was a profound statement about the power of self-governance and individual liberty, a lesson that would echo through history and inspire free peoples for millennia to come. The victory secured the Aegean Sea, pushing the Persian threat back across the Hellespont permanently. But more importantly, it safeguarded what we might call the cradle of Western thought. Greek ideas, trial by jury, the transformative power of theater, the rigorous pursuit of logic and philosophy, the radical concept that ordinary citizens should have a voice in their government. All of these revolutionary concepts survived because of what happened on a dusty plain in central Greece. Without Plataea, the intellectual and cultural landscape of our world would be unrecognizably different. The seeds of democracy, philosophy, and rational inquiry that would eventually take root in Rome, spread across Europe, and ultimately shape the modern world. All of this depended on 80,000 Greeks refusing to give up when everything seemed hopeless. The battle also established the phalanx, that disciplined wall of shields and spears, as the gold standard of ancient warfare. For the next century and a half, until Alexander the Great's innovative combined arms tactics appeared on the scene, the hoplite phalanx remained the ultimate expression of military power. Its devastating effectiveness at Plataea, where it shattered a numerically superior force, cemented its reputation and influence for generations of warriors. Few Persian survivors, a broken remnant of what had once been the mightiest army in the world, limped back across the Hellespont, carrying news that would shake the Persian Empire to its foundations. Their dreams of European conquest lay buried in the ash-covered ruins of their camp at Plataea. King Xerxes, who had watched his fleet burn at Salamis the year before, never again risked a land invasion of Greece. The lesson had been learned brutally and decisively. The Greeks were not the easy prey he had imagined. The cost of conquest was simply too high. The Spartans, covered in glory and carrying the bronze armor of Mardonius as a grim trophy, returned home to a hero's welcome. It was undeniable proof that even the most formidable empire builders could fall, that even a king's cousin wasn't invincible when facing free men fighting for their homeland. The Athenians, their city slowly rising from the ashes like a phoenix, rebuilt with newfound confidence. Within 50 years, they would construct a naval empire that stretched across the Aegean, funded by silver mines and sustained by the democratic ideals they had fought so hard to preserve. It was a remarkable transformation from a burned-out ruin to the cultural capital of the ancient world. But perhaps the most lasting monument to the battle isn't found in any museum or archaeological site. On the quiet ridge near Plataea, where the fate of civilizations was decided in a single day, local farmers still turn up arrowheads and spear points when their plows bite deep into the spring soil. Each artifact is a tangible reminder, a whisper from the past about what can be achieved when ordinary people refuse to accept defeat. The Battle of Plataea teaches us something profound about human nature and the power of free peoples fighting for their values. 80,000 Greeks, farmers, craftsmen, and citizen soldiers, faced down the mightiest empire in the world and won not through superior numbers or better equipment, but through discipline, intelligent use of terrain, and the sheer stubborn refusal to quit when everything seemed hopeless. It's a lesson that resonates across the centuries. In every generation, in every culture, there come moments when ordinary people must decide whether to bend the knee or stand up for what they believe in. The Greeks at Plataea chose to stand, and in doing so, they changed the world. Their victory didn't just save Greece. It preserved the very ideas that would eventually flower into the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and the modern democratic societies we know today. Every time we vote in an election, every time we demand trial by jury, every time we insist on the right to speak freely or worship as we choose, we're exercising freedoms that were secured on that dusty battlefield 25 centuries ago. The true measure of Plataea isn't found in the casualty figures or the amount of Persian gold captured, impressive as those numbers might be. It's found in the fact that a small group of free city-states proved that citizens fighting for their own liberty could defeat subjects fighting for someone else's glory. If this deep dive into one of history's most pivotal battles has inspired you, make sure to subscribe for more untold stories from the ancient world. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest content, and let me know in the comments which historical battle or figure you'd like to see covered next. Your suggestions help shape our content, and I read every single comment. Remember, the past isn't just a collection of dates and names. It's the story of real people facing impossible odds, and sometimes, against all expectations, finding a way to triumph. The Greeks at Plataea proved that freedom is worth fighting for, and that even the smallest nations can make the biggest difference when they stand together. Until next time, keep exploring history, and remember, sometimes the most important battles are won not by the biggest armies, but by those with the most to lose and the greatest determination to protect what they hold dear.